Welcome. It is Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you as well, Senator. We totally changed places. You're in Houston. That's where I usually am. I'm in D.C., where you usually are. And this is where we are today, getting ready ahead of the State of the Union. It's going to be a fun show. We've got a lot to talk about, including a killing of a cartel leader in Mexico.
Well, violence has broken out in Mexico. Chaos is unfolding right now. You and I are recording this on Sunday afternoon. As we're recording it, a major Mexican cartel leader was taken out by the Mexican government, the Mexican army. The reaction has been violence, serious violence that is escalating. Some of it is reportedly targeting American tourists. We're going to break down what happens and what it means. We're also going to talk about the major Supreme Court decision that came down this week. The Supreme Court struck down President Trump's use of tariffs, the centerpiece of his economic policy abroad. The Supreme Court said that the statute he used to impose those tariffs, a statute called IEEPA, does not give him the authority to do so. We're going to explain what that decision was all about, what the court held, and in particular, what happens next. What does this mean? Does this mean Trump can't use tariffs? Does it mean nothing changes? We're going to break it down and give you everything you need to know to understand this topic. And finally, we're going to celebrate the Olympics, a victory in men's hockey, USA, and we're going to highlight a couple of the extraordinary athletes who represented America and brought home the gold. All of that's on today's podcast.
Yeah, hockey, American-Canada game. We got to talk about that one as well. It was really, really fun. All right, Senator, so right before we started recording, we get this big news, and that is that the government in Mexico took out the leader of one of these cartels. There are several different cartel leaders, depending on which region you're in Mexico. This was a significant one. There was a large bounty on this individual's head by the U.S. government as well. And now we're seeing what many were fearful of, that is, and this is part of what the cartels do. You come after us, we'll go after the economy and tourism, and that's the biggest concern for so many Americans that are down there. Spring break has started as well.
Yeah. So here's the story of the New York Times about what has happened. Mexican forces kill nation's most wanted cartel boss. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, was the head of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel and widely regarded as one of the country's most violent criminal figures. The Mexican government said it killed the nation's most wanted cartel boss on Sunday, a major victory in its new offensive against the country's criminal groups, and a move that could help reduce pressure from President Trump, who has been threatening strikes in Mexico. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, was the longtime leader of one of Mexico's most powerful cartels, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and he was widely regarded as one of the country's most violent criminal figures. He presided over a criminal enterprise that expanded rapidly over the past decade, producing and selling drugs and extorting local businesses. He also built a reputation for brazen attacks on security forces and terrorizing communities across the country. Mexican security forces led an operation Sunday to capture Mr. Oseguera in Tapalpa, a town of about 20,000 in the western coastal state of Jalisco, where his cartel was founded and based, the Mexican government said. At least 7 cartel members were killed during the operation. Mr. Oseguera and 2 other cartel operatives were seriously injured in the operation and died while in transport to Mexico City for medical attention, according to the Mexican government. Mr. Oseguera's killing set off a swift outbreak of violence across Mexico. In at least 6 states, including Jalisco, residents and the local authorities reported that burning vehicles were blocking streets, a common practice by drug cartels. The state of Jalisco said it had suspended public transportation in some areas and warned hotels to instruct their guests to remain inside. The state of Nayarit canceled classes on Monday. The U.S. government warned its citizens to shelter in place until further notice in parts of 5 states, Jalisco, Tamaulipas, Michoacán, Guerrero, and Nuevo León. Various airlines issued travel advisories or halted flights. Some of the violence occurred in Guadalajara, Jalisco's capital, a hub of 1.4 million people that is a host city for this year's World Cup. Panic broke out at Guadalajara International Airport on Sunday, with videos posted on social media showing airport staff and travelers fleeing the building. But the airport and Mexican federal government said that the airport was operating as normal and there was no risk to flyers. In the northern border city of Reynosa, which is located right across the river from McAllen, Texas, Main roads and entrances were blocked with burning vehicles, according to local media reports. Vanda Felbab Brown, an expert on non-state armed groups at the Brookings Institute, said the significance of Mr. Oseguera's killing rivaled that of the capture of Sinaloa cartel leader Joaquin Guzman Loera, known as El Chapo, in 2016, or of his former partner Ismael Zambada Garcia, known as El Mayo, in 2024. Look, this is rapidly unfolding. There are reports of cartels targeting American citizens, going after them. It's a dangerous time. This could change in the hours and days ahead. I'm certainly glad that a major cartel leader who has been smuggling drugs into the United States, has been responsible for killing Americans, is no longer with us, but it makes it very dangerous for the people of Mexico, and potentially very dangerous for Americans as well.
You know, you and I have talked about this, and the concern, obviously, that you and I both have is that the Mexico is being run by these cartels. We know that. And that's been one of the things that Donald Trump has been talking about, is like, look, you guys are killing Americans with the amount of drugs coming across your border, the fentanyl and other things. We also know about the open border just from human smuggling and human trafficking and sex trafficking and child sex trafficking, those combined. And the president made it clear to Mexico, you better act or we will act the same way that we acted and we weren't bluffing in Venezuela, taking out a narco terrorist there. This is clearly, I think, Mexico's government signaling that we heard you, and probably more so since what they witnessed in Venezuela. And they're saying we would rather choose who we take out than you guys start doing it. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's a very fair assessment. As you'll recall, in August of last year, I went down to Mexico. I did a trip to El Salvador and Panama and Mexico, and I met with senior officials in the Mexican government. And the message I conveyed to them is that they needed to get serious fighting the cartels, to stop the drug trafficking into America, to stop the human trafficking into America. And the message I conveyed is, if you don't get serious, President Trump is going to. And this was before the Maduro raid, but the Maduro raid was not a surprise, in that it was clear the president was going to do what is necessary to keep America safe. And my message, and the Mexican leaders did not like that.
Yeah.
When I conveyed that message, I said, look, we're not going to let you just sit there and turn a blind eye while these transnational criminal organizations flood poisons into America and kill Americans, and while they traffic in human beings and assault and sexually assault little children. We're not simply going to sit by and say, that's okay. This is not the Biden administration. These are not Democrats who are going to say, we have no problem with thousands of children being molested by human traffickers because it furthers our political agenda to get more people in America who will vote for Democrats. That is not what this administration is doing, and you and I talked about it in the wake of the Maduro arrest. I said, listen, this has changed the geopolitical power structure throughout Latin America. Every dictator in Latin America, at 3 a.m. on January 3rd, they changed their shorts.
Yeah.
The leadership, the communist leadership in Cuba and Nicaragua, those guys are terrified. In Colombia, we saw Petro immediately calling and saying, Mr. President, I'm not resisting you at all. Like we saw the immediate reaction in Colombia. And look, I emphasized in nations like Brazil and Mexico. Brazil and Mexico stand on very different footing than a Cuba or a Nicaragua or even a Colombia. But they are headed by leftists who have been vocally anti-American. And I will say Mexico has pivoted sharply. And this is a real manifestation of that. And Ben, it's worth not losing sight of the fact. You might say, okay, well, why target these narco-terrorists? Why do this?
Yeah.
One of the most compelling stats from the last year is that murder rates nationally have dropped more than 20%.
Nationwide. It's incredible.
Nationwide. Yeah. Drug overdose rates nationwide have dropped more than 20%. There are literally, this is not exaggeration, there are literally thousands of Americans who are alive today because Trump was reelected and Republicans were put in charge of Congress. If we had kept the Democrat open borders going, there would be thousands more Americans dead from murder and other violent crime and from drug overdoses. And I got to tell you, Ben, did you happen to read front page story in the Houston Chronicle a couple of weeks ago?
Which one?
On the murder rates.
Yes, no, I did. And what's interesting about where you're going with this is most police departments and local governments celebrate a 3% drop in violent crime.
Yeah.
Like that's like worth having a press conference over for you to say, look at this trend. And now you look at what you mentioned nationwide and go back to, I know where you're going with the story, but like these are numbers that traditionally would take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of every year doubling down to get the numbers down as fast as they've under Trump administration. It's remarkable.
Well, it's about 2-3 weeks ago, Houston Chronicle, front page, top of the fold, banner headline, murder rate in Houston, Texas drops 18%.
Yeah.
You and I both live in Houston. That's good news. Our families are in Houston. Heidi handed me this story on a newspaper, on an airplane, and she did it because she knew it would piss me off.
That's when you know you have a good wife. When
your wife would never do that to you, right?
No, they never poke the bear. Yeah, keep going.
So I read the article, and the article says the murder rate has dropped 18%. Nobody can figure out why. It's completely baffling. Experts are confused. There is no possible cause. It just magically, unicorns flew from the sky. They spread pixie dust, and the murder rates fell 18%. And it did not occur to the reporter, to these, quote, experts who are all left-wing knuckleheads, that maybe arresting and deporting thousands upon thousands of murderers and rapists and gangbangers who are illegal immigrants, maybe if there are fewer murderers, there will be fewer murders. This is not subtle or complex public policy, and yet the Houston Chronicle, this is completely indecipherable.
Yeah, it really is. You know, I'm in D.C. right now. You're coming back up here, obviously, for the State of the Union, and I'm up here for literally meetings on the State of the Union. And one of the things that was asked, I was earlier today, what should the president focus on? What are the issues? This is obviously a curveball, and this is what the writers are going to be dealing with right now. But what would your advice be to the president on should this make it in the State of the Union? And should you say to Mexico, hey, you're heading in the right direction, but we're not finished yet. Like, it's time to keep going? Or is this where you let them take the lead? I'm very much torn on this one. I think this is American foreign policy first. You say, look, this is a step in the right direction, but let's be clear. There's several other leaders of other cartels in Mexico that are still active right now.
Listen, I very much agree with President Trump and his focus on America first. I spoke with the president just a few days ago, spent about 30 minutes on the phone with him, and we actually talked about it before this drug dealer was killed. But I talked to him about, I said, look, let me encourage you and the administration, focus more on the messaging about what you and I just talked about the murder rate plummeting, the drug overdose deaths plummeting. That is a big deal. And so I think it's perfectly appropriate and would be fitting to mention this drug dealer being killed, but I wouldn't make the focus Mexico. I wouldn't make the focus, by the way, Venezuela or any other country. What I would make the focus is America. That by standing up to narco-terrorists, by standing up to people who are killing Americans, fewer Americans are dying. I think the entire speech on Tuesday should be all about how people's lives are materially better because of the policies President Trump has put in place and a Republican Congress has put in place. And I'd like to see crime and law and order as a major, major theme of the address.
Final question for you. You mentioned earlier that there's a shelter in place. Your office, I'm sure, is going to get a lot of phone calls on Monday. If I was down in Mexico for spring break right now, I'd be calling as well. If you have family down there or you're down there and you're listening to this and you want to just, who do you talk to? Who do you get in touch with? What do you do? And what do you tell your family to do when it comes to contacting? Do you contact Congress, senators, or who do you call?
You know, I would go to the State Department website. They put out country notices. They have information, and they have information typically broken down by the particular region, by the state within Mexico. There is no doubt that Mexico right now, it is a very dangerous place, that tragically the cartel violence has gotten really bad. Now Ben, you know I'm a fan of Mexico. I happen to like Cancun.
Yeah.
A couple people may have noticed that. Look, I think Mexico is a beautiful country. Texas and Mexico have a long history that is intertwined. And what has happened to Mexico in recent years with the cartel violence is tragic. That being said, if you're thinking of going to Mexico for spring break, I would be very cautious. I would read the State Department website closely. I would read news reports. We don't know how this is going to go. If it escalates, if we see the cartels targeting American tourists at a significant level, I would think very carefully about that.
Yeah, it's a great point. Again, go to the State Department, but I know that that's going to be a question. I hope we answer for people that are either there or thinking about going there. I was one of those, by the way. You and I talked about that before the show, and it's everything on my text thread right now is about this, no doubt. All right, I want to move on to another issue, and we made predictions on this show. This is when I should say you made predictions on this show. Separate myself from them. I was.
Oh, look at this. Who's we? Ben throwing me overboard so fast.
So, Senator, you made a prediction about the Supreme Court on tariffs. It was actually really funny this morning. I was doing a Fox News Sunday. Shannon Bream looked at me. She goes, I listened to y'all's the show when you were making your predictions because 99% of the time, Ted's right on the Supreme Court. Yeah. And he made a prediction. He thought it was going to go the president's way on these. It didn't. But there was also something interesting in there. Brett Kavanaugh wrote basically in there, and I found this incredibly interesting, that, hey, what we're saying you did, you can't necessarily do it that way. However, here is a way you can do it. It reminded me almost of like Obamacare, when they're like, well, if you do it this way, then you can get away with it. But the way you're doing it, don't keep doing it that way. Do it this other way. It was like a roadmap for him to still have tariffs, still have the power that the presidency needs to do this. And you saw the president jump all over that with a 10% saying, this ain't going away. I don't know if this is as big of a defeat as Democrats and media are trying to make it out to be. And the president's instant response, I think, it proves he still has a ton of power.
Well, listen, I'm going to start by eating crow. I did make a prediction on this podcast, and I make a lot of predictions on this podcast, and we've never tallied the number, but I think we're north of 80% and maybe even north of 90% of being right.
I'm going to give you credit. It's above 90 because I make sure I give you a hard time when you're wrong, and that's not very often. So this is on that sheet, but you know. Yeah, no,
and by the way, we don't make small and mild predictions. I mean, we make bold and aggressive predictions. In 2024,
can we just remind people the biggest one? Yeah, Joe Biden. Let's just talk about it.
I predicted that Joe Biden would not be the nominee a year before it happened, and said they are going to replace him. He is not going to be on the ballot in November, and the corporate media made fun of me like crazy for that prediction. Of course, it was exactly right. We've made a lot of predictions. We broke down in March and April of the beginning of COVID. I laid out the evidence that the COVID virus escaped from a Chinese government lab right at the beginning. Yeah. And the predictions that we laid out there, the evidence we laid out there was square on right. So I made a prediction that the Supreme Court 5-4 would uphold the president's use of tariffs. That prediction proved false. What actually happened is 6-3, the court struck it down. I also predicted that John Roberts would write the majority opinion. I guess that did prove technically accurate, but he wrote the majority opinion going the other way. Here's why I thought the court was going to uphold the president's tariffs. And I said there are massive reliance interests. There have been hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs collected, and the court is reluctant to dramatically upset the status quo. And I did say, if the court were deciding this issue a year ago, right at the beginning of the Trump administration, I said, I think they'd come out the other way.
Yeah.
But after a year plus, after this being central to the economic and foreign policy agenda of the president, I thought the court would not struck it down. That proved wrong. But at the end of the day, I don't think it matters a whole lot. Let's cut to the conclusion. I don't think the consequences of this decision are going to be all that much. What the court decided narrowly is that one particular statute, IEEPA, does not give the president the authority to impose tariffs. Now, mind you, IEEPA gives the president the authority to, quote, regulate importations.
Yeah.
And so the majority opinion concluded the president can ban an import from a country, can say, we will import 0 German cars into America. He can do that. But he can't say we're going to charge $1 for each one of those German cars.
Yep.
That is a pretty loopy conclusion. And I got to say the dissents, Justice Kavanaugh wrote the lead dissent. Justice Thomas wrote an excellent dissent. I think the dissents get the much better of the argument. That the words that Congress put in the IEEPA statute, regulate importation, And Justice Thomas had an originalist dissent where he goes through, in the foreign policy area in particular, the ability to import goods from other countries was never viewed as a right. It was a privilege the government allowed you to do. And in fact, tariffs were a major tool government used to regulate importation from other countries. So I think the majority decision is wrong. But here's the thing that matters. There are so many other statutes that allow the president to impose tariffs that I think we will see essentially the same regime. It's going to be a little more complicated. He's going to have to do a little bit more work. It's going to require some more legal proceedings. But I think you're going to see, and we saw immediately the president announced a 10% tariff on every country. He then upped that to 15%. But I think at the end of the day, the president will continue to use tariffs as a critical part of his foreign policy. And I hope, and we've talked about this on Verdict before, I hope that he uses tariffs as leverage to open up foreign markets. I don't want a world where we have high tariffs for everyone, but I do think tariffs are very powerful leverage, and I think the president has ample authority to continue using them.
You know what's interesting about this? When it happened, there was two people that were really celebrating, two groups, I should say. The Democratic Party and China. And China was really celebrating this, and then they were talking about buying soybean crops from other countries instead of America, and that was like one of the big things that really blew up in the media and on social media. And then you have the same excitement from the Chinese Communist Party as you did from the Democratic Party. That tells me an awful lot about this tariff war issue. This is just, to Democrats, not about what's best for America, not about us having better trade deals, not about saving American jobs or American manufacturing, protecting that, or bringing jobs back to this country in manufacturing and bringing back American businesses to our soil. They just want Donald Trump to lose, and they're on the same team with China on this one.
Yeah, look, that's where Democrats are. That's where much of the media is. Let me walk through two things. Number one, there's going to be some chaos. One of the reasons I didn't think the court would do what they did is you've got hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs that's going to be collected. There's going to be massive litigation. Everyone that's paid the tariffs is going to look at, do I go back? Do I sue? Do I try to collect it? It's going to vary in terms of whether they filed a timely protest to the tariffs. I think some of those tariffs, the litigation result is going to be no, you can't get it back because you didn't timely protest it. Some of the people who paid tariffs will have timely protested it. And so there's a very good chance this is going to cost American taxpayers billions of dollars, maybe even tens of billions of dollars or more. That litigation chaos will unfold for years. I didn't think the court would do that. But in terms of the president's ability to do this, so let me walk through some of the different statutes that are available. There is, number one, Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930. That's actually the Smoot-Hawley Act. Yeah. Which authorizes the president to impose tariffs of up to 50% on imports from any country that, quote, discriminates against U.S. businesses. The statute is vague and it is short, and no president has used this authority. So it's uncharted area, but it remains on the statute book. So that's one area. Another area, which is where the president went pretty much immediately, is Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. The Section 122 gives the president the power to impose duties of up to 15% for up to 150 days in order to address, quote, large and serious balance of payments deficits. Congress has to vote to extend them past the 150-day limit, or else the duties expire, but the president is able to reissue them on expiration. This is what the president used as a result immediately to impose the 15% tariff. So that's one avenue. And then there are a couple of others. Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 authorizes the U.S. Trade Representative to investigate and act upon results of an investigation revealing unfair trade practices. Section 301 has been used quite a bit. In 2024, the Biden administration opened 3 investigations under Section 301 and determined that the countries had violated the provisions there. That's also what in Trump's second administration, U.S. Trade Representative's office has opened a 301 investigation into Brazil and China, and they're considering one for Korea. So Section 301 takes an investigation. It's a little slower, but it gives more potent tariff authority. There is also Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. And that allows the president to impose restrictions on goods and imports and following an investigation if it's found that the imports, quote, threaten to impair U.S. national security. So Trump has used that for steel imports and aluminum imports. In 2025, he expanded steel and aluminum tariffs, increasing the aluminum rate to 25%, eliminating all country exemptions. To date, the Trump administration has launched 12 different Section 232 investigations, concluded 5. And then there's finally Section 201 of the Trade Act of 1974, which permits temporary safeguard tariffs to protect domestic industries from serious injury caused by import surges. Trump has used Section 201 to put tariffs on solar cells, on modules, and in residential washing machines. Look, the long and short of it, you guys don't need to memorize all those different section numbers. The point is, there are a bunch of different federal laws that give the president a bunch of authority to impose tariffs. The lawyers in the administration will work a little bit harder. As Justice Kavanaugh said in dissent, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court said, well, you checked the wrong box and you picked the wrong statute, so these tariffs don't apply. But the bottom line is going to be the president's going to be able to get there using other means.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the president also responds on the State of the Union to this. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty blunt. I love when they ask him, like, what do you say? This justice still invited? He goes, yes, but barely, which kind of made me laugh. It's like, yeah, that's never a dull moment with Donald Trump on this stuff. I have a feeling it's going to be a very fun State of the Union to watch. All right, Senator, and finally we get to end on a really, really fun note. The hockey game and the Olympics, like, America versus Canada. I love how sports brings everybody together. I'm sitting there in the green room about to get ready to do Fox News Sunday. Treasury Secretary Bessent comes in. We're all watching the game as we're trying to go on TV to talk politics because it was amazing. And then it went to overtime, and I rushed back to where I'm staying to watch the end of the game. America wins in overtime. It was like the best Sunday morning of sports. It was just, and America beating Canada in hockey, always, it just takes you back to the Miracle on Ice. What a fun way to wrap up the Olympics.
Look, it was 46 years to the day after the Miracle on Ice, where 1980 we won that game, and this time it was USA and Canada. And listen, Canada is the powerhouse in hockey, and for America to win, we had our women hockey players had beaten Canada in the finals, so we'd already taken home the gold in women's hockey. Justin Trudeau, when he was Prime Minister of Canada, famously said, "You can't have our sport." Well, sorry, Justin. Turned out that's not quite right, and it was just, it's a spectacular victory, and I want to say the hockey players, both the men's and women's hockey players, they loved America. They draped themselves in the flag. They didn't engage in the sort of petulant. They are playing for the country in a way that just makes you proud. That's what you want to see our athletes, like, standing up for our country, not using it for whatever their particular political agenda is for the moment, but just proud to be an American. And I want you to listen to Jack Hughes, who scored the game-winning goal in overtime. Listen to him right after the game.
This is all about our country right now. I love the USA. I love my teammates. It's unbelievable. The USA Hockey Brotherhood is so strong, and we have so much support from ex-players. I'm so proud to be American today. This
was such an incredible game to grind out. I mean, you're bleeding right through it just looking at you right now. Can you just talk about how difficult this gold medal was to win?
Unbelievable game by Hellebuck. He was our best player tonight by a mile. Unbelievable game. Unreal game by our team. That's just a ballsy, gutsy win. That's American hockey right there. That's a great Canadian team, but we're USA. We're so proud to be Americans. Tonight was all for the country.
What does this gold medal mean to USA Hockey?
It's everything. Like I said, the USA Hockey Brotherhood means so much. Look at these guys. We're such a team. We've been together for 2 weeks. We're such a team. The USA Hockey Brotherhood is so strong, and we're so proud to win for our country.
Amen, amen, amen. Hallelujah. Look, that's just awesome. By the way, I'm sure you've seen, Ben, the picture of him with the flag draped over and his front teeth kicked in and all bloody.
Yeah.
That is going to be, that may be the iconic picture of this Olympics.
That's the Nolan Ryan on the mount, like when he gets charged the mount and he's pounding the guy. That is the iconic picture. It also is just what you want, like to see them loving playing for their country, so proud of their country. I mean, they couldn't contain it. Their faces when they were raising the American flag, playing the national anthem, like they were just beaming with American pride. It's why I love the Olympics, and to win the way they won in overtime, against Trudeau's boys, as I saw it described on X earlier, and I was like, that's awesome. God bless America. Like, I'm so proud to be an American and watch them do this.
Yeah, and I gotta say, look, I'm not a hockey fan. I'm a Houston guy. We don't have ice down here. I'm a hoops fan and a football fan and a baseball fan. But hockey is not my thing. But I went and looked up Jack Hughes to get a little of his background, and it's interesting. He plays for the New Jersey Devils, plays in the NHL, and he was born in Orlando, Florida. Now, he grew up in Toronto, so he lived in Canada for a number of years, and then he relocated his family to Michigan for high school, and he was the number one pick in the NHL draft in 2019. He's an all-star now, and I got to say, he is a forever American in my book. With this victory, he has immortalized himself in history, and so I just want to close today's pod by saying three things: USA, USA, USA.
Amen to that. Don't forget, we do this podcast Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Hit that subscribe or auto download button so you don't miss an episode. Plus, you can watch the podcast on YouTube and also on Facebook. So if you're on YouTube, you can hit the subscribe button there. You won't miss one of the video pods as well. And the Senator and I will see you back here after the State of the Union on Wednesday morning.